Let me introduce this wonderful panel. Matthew Castle is one of the editors of this book, journalist, photographer, based in Middle East for ages. 8 years, 9 years?
9 years, something like that.
Lost track, sorry.
Yeah.
He's formerly the assistant editor of the Electronic Intifada. He's now a journalist with English Al-Jazeera, and he also writes for a stack of other publications. Layla Al-Zubaidi, co-author of this book, co-editor, rather, is director of the South Africa office of the Heinrich Böll Foundation in Cape Town. She headed the foundation's Middle East office in Beirut for 6 years, and she served as program manager at its office in Ramallah. She's worked for several media and development institutions. She's also a brilliant writer, although that isn't written here, but you should know that. Mohammed Maserati is a Libyan writer and journalist. He now lives in the UK. He started to publish his short stories online in 2007. He was discovered as a fantastic fiction writer at a stupidly early age, just outrageous. His work as a journalist for Al-Kef newspaper has featured investigative reports on social issues in Libya. And an extract from his novel in progress, Mama Pizza, appeared in Banipal, an issue of Banipal, number 40. Finally, Ali Abdul Imam, very nice to see you.
Thank you.
Finally. He's a Bahraini blogger. He's the founder of the excellent blog Bahrain Online, and he's a human rights activist. He took part in the protest calling for democracy in Bahrain in February, March 2011. He was among the first to agree to contribute to this book, Writing Revolution, but he then went into hiding during a government crackdown on the protest movement. He was sentenced in absentia to 15 years in prison, and he recently fled Bahrain to the UK, where he's been granted asylum. He's representing his friend and fellow political refugee, Dr. Ali Al-Deri, who ended up contributing to this book, but sadly wasn't able to make it to the UK for the event. So, first of all, let's start by having a quick chat with the editors, just to see, Matthew, how all this came about in the first place.
I'm going to start with just a brief excerpt from the beginning of the book. You could go mad. That is how living in my dear country, Tunisia, made me feel. I concluded, not entirely seriously, that every Tunisian who, like me, looked closely at the situation in his homeland must carry within him the seeds of such a madness, the early symptoms of a split personality. From the outside, all seemed fine, and nothing was fine from within. Everything was beautiful, rosy, and full of life, and hope on television and the 8 o'clock news, in the papers and on the radio. Advertising slots were full of laughing, attractive faces, encouraging us to buy what we produced. But in the city streets and suburbs, in the villages and towns, all was sad and shocking. Faces yellowed by the vicissitudes of fate, the evaporation of dreams. Hordes of police stood watch everywhere, observing the cries and groans of lost time, which stamped its tattoo across the lips and brows of this fine people. It was a dreadful contradiction, one that you lived out in the fine grain of your existence, the conflict between the life you were told that you lived and the one you really did. That excerpt is from our Tunisian writer, Malik Zghiri, and I wanted to read it because I think it shows the literary style of this book, this new collection of writing. I encourage people to read this new collection of writing. And I think it also touches on a theme that you'll find present in a lot of these essays, and that is that the perception of the Arab world is different from without and from within. And as a journalist working in the Arab world, I think this is something I can understand, because a lot of the misconceptions that we have of the Arab world outside, especially in Western and English-speaking countries, I think we bear, as journalists, we bear some responsibility for that. Coverage is often quick. We have to meet deadlines, especially with the pace of social media. We have to keep up with it. We miss out on a lot of detail. More and more, we rely on a small group, an elite group of experts who often tell media, I think, what they want to hear, and which doesn't also often reflect what's happening on the ground. And I think a big problem is a lot of journalists, in fact, most journalists working in the Arab world, at least most Western journalists, don't speak Arabic. So they lack understanding there of the language, of a lot of the culture, and they miss out on a lot because of that. Now, that isn't to say that foreign journalists aren't providing a valuable service. Especially in Syria, we're seeing, you know, a lot of journalists sacrifice everything, sacrifice their lives to provide very valuable coverage, I think, from inside Syria. But I also want to say that, you know, I think we shouldn't neglect the voices that are happening, that are coming from inside the country, especially like young people like, you know, Mohammed Maserati and Ali Abdul Imam. So that's why when Nemini Craven approached me with this idea, I was more than happy to take part, because I think this is something that we need to have more of in the English-speaking world. We need to have translated works, voices. We need to give a platform to these voices so we can, you know what's going on. And I know it's not an easy process, and my colleague Leila, I think, can talk more about that, because there was a lot of difficulties in making this book happen.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe if I may add, the process of finding the authors, actually, the protagonists of this book, was really not easy, because we kind of decided to work together because we had networks of activists, of bloggers, of authors, etc., that we thought might be useful in finding authors for this book. And we really had the feeling that everybody who we approached really wanted this book to happen. But if you ask revolutionaries to write, and especially to write about themselves and their personal stories, then that is not easy, because they actually have to sit back and reflect on what they're doing. And for that you need time, and you need some space. You need, you need some calm moments. And if you're really in the heat of the battle, that's very difficult to find. I mean, most people were really engaged on the streets. Some of them, like Malik Zriri, he was really physically fighting with the police in his hometown, Tala, in Tunisia.
He was arrested and tortured.
Arrested and tortured. Others were, in and out of prison. Others in Syria, for example, really grappled with communication, because sometimes there's no electricity, there's no internet, so communication was difficult. So really, I mean, the process of finding authors, I think, almost took us a year, I think. And Ali Abdul Imam is just one example, somebody who agreed actually to participate and then disappeared, and we really didn't know what happened to you, if you were in Bahrain, outside of Bahrain, if you were in prison and hiding, possibly dead. I mean, really, we had no idea what happened. We're really happy that you're with us on this panel, actually. And then the second issue we grappled with was translation. And everybody who speaks Arabic, I think there are many of you in the audience, actually, know that, especially if you have an anthology of different contributions from across the region, that there are different dialects involved. So it's actually not one Arabic that we're dealing with, but many Arabics. So it's different dialects from Tunis to Syria. It's different idioms, it's different colloquials, and it's also different cultural contexts. So for example, fitna, division, means something different in Syria with this confessionalist background than it means in Tunis, for example. And then also the contributions were extremely different. We have a Bahraini intellectual kind of contemplates or reflects on his role as an intellectual in the revolution. In Syria, it's a journalist who is really working on the ground with people, trying to get stories from everywhere. As I said, the Tunisian author was a student leader. So it's different generations, different backgrounds, different ways of expressing and of writing. And that was an issue that was really, I mean, it was the biggest problem for the translator, Robin Moja, who really did a fantastic job, and we should acknowledge him here, to kind of bring that together and to keep the original voices of the texts, even in the English translation.
I mean, it's interesting that it took that long to find the contributors. But what you were saying before, Matthew, does seem to me that running through this book, running through these essays, there is a thread of, we have a role here as revolutionaries, as activists, as intellectuals, as writers, to portray this from the inside out as opposed to from the outside looking in. There seems to be at the core of quite a lot of this writing, and I'm just wondering if there's any other themes that you see emerging from this collection of essays.
I think what a lot of writers wanted to focus on is that this process of uprising, of revolution, whatever we want to call it, didn't begin, in Egypt, let's say, on January 25th, or in Tunis in mid-December, or in Libya in February 2011. This began months, years, decades previous to that. And I think every writer wanted to really stress that, and we wanted to bring that out as well, because obviously, we were familiar with that, having spoken to them, and that was one of, I think, the motivations for wanting to write this book, is to show how much struggle, how much sacrifice happened in the years and decades leading up to this uprising that made it possible in the different countries.
Okay, well, let's move on to the contributors. And Mohammed, when your essay is obviously focused on the uprising in Libya, and when that happened, you were here, and it was completely unexpected. Can you talk us through what your writing is reflecting and what was going on there for you?
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's a very good question, because when I wrote this essay, I was writing with my non-consciousness and with all my emotions at that time. When the uprising happened in Libya, I didn't know about it at all. I was like thinking it's not going to happen. And on February 16th, I was doubting that it's going to happen after 42 years of dictatorship and of fear and madness. So when that happened, I found myself like I have to get my position now, and I have to do something. And as a writer, I found myself like I have many ideas and visions that happened to me. Since when it started to click. Many visions from my childhood, from my parents' activism in Libya, and I found out this time that I need to write about my parents as in oppositions in underground Libya. And my mother was writing under a nickname, and my father was a play actor, and he's been followed a lot because of his activism in theater. And I found that the only subject I can write about is my parents, who didn't want to write their biography. And as a son who's dreaming to become a writer, and one day I found that this is the only time I can write about them in a way that shows the history of 42 years of dictatorship in Libya. Yeah.
So you found your voice through their experiences?
Yes, definitely, because I didn't know that my parents in the opposition, or I didn't know what opposition means until we came here. And when we came here when I was 15, we were rushing because they were under a threat and everything after my mother, because there's some rumors that my mother's name is being mentioned, and we had to flee from Libya at that time. And I didn't know anything, all I knew that we are going to Manchester, but for no reason. And when I asked my dad, for how long are you going to stay there, he said 3 months to 6 months. And we are here for 8 years now, and we never went back there. So I'm just, I was waiting for that moment until, suddenly I discovered myself. I'm living here, and they've got a story that should be told. Yeah.
I mean, it's quite interesting. Your writing is very, very layered. It's like sort of peeling off all these layers of revelations that are going on. And was that your experience of just waking up to protests and eventually, what eventually led to the uprising? Is that what it was like for you personally as well?
It was kind of like making my own demonstration at home in front of my computer, So when I was writing this essay, I thought that this is it's the question came when the uprising started in Libya. Many people tell me, why are you uprising against Gaddafi? He's a good leader, he's a good man, and he helps people and everything. I said, yeah, well, he maybe he do this, for his own interest, outside Libya. But when we come, talk about situation of 42 years, that people know nothing about what happened in Libya during the 80s and 70s. All the massacres happened in 1996. 1,200 people died in 2 hours, and nobody knew anything about them. So I thought that people should know more about Libya and what happened especially in the 80s. So when the chance came with Nimnik Craven Roderick, when she emailed me, she's my literary agent, and she emailed me and asked me, to write something, I found myself, here you go, I'm in front of the computer, and Nimnik asked me, told me like 3,000 words or 5,000 words, and I wrote like 7,000 words. I could write even more at that time. because many like visions comes, you know, when I was young, you know, in school, and we see all the time, you know, the pictures of Gaddafi everywhere, when you have to study all his quotes and from the Green Book, you know, since, you know, the first year in the school until, you know, you graduate from the university. And how February 17th happened in Libya. I mean, it doesn't matter what the ideology is about anything, but what matters is that people were full of anger. They want to express this kind of like an anger after, especially what happened in Tunisia and then Egypt, and they felt that they can do it as well. And when it happened and I couldn't be part of it, I felt like as a story writer, and I'm very, very sure about my talent, so you know, I decided to write about it.
That was your role, and you took it. Ali, very different situation with you. We're delighted that you're here.
Thank you.
Of course, it's a great shame that, you know, the reasons for which you were not able to contribute an essay to this book. What would your essay have been had you written it? What would you have liked to say?
I do remember when they first approached me regarding writing the essay for this book. I was asking myself, and maybe they can find it in the corresponding email, that I wasn't sure that I'm the suitable man or to write these things. So I was asking for more information on how it's going on. But my friend Ali Deri, when he is a close friend to me, and I'm representing him, he wrote it from a different perspective than what I was thinking to write. Ali Deri is one of the intellectuals in Bahrain, and he is looking to the things from his culture background, not from his ethnic or sector or whatever differentiate between him. But if I'm the one who will write this essay, I think I will write on how I will reflect the youth voice, why this revolution is happening, why the youth are in the street, what's make them so angry that they are ready to die, and they just wrote it in their clothes that we are ready to die, and for what? I think I will try, if I'm the one who will write this essay, I will try to answer this, because in 2005 I did an interview with the New York Times, and they asked me until when the people will just calm down with all of this corruption regime. I was answering him that I think the new generation will not accept to live the same way we did, and our fathers and old generation accept to live with these rulers in Bahrain. I think the new generation will do their own revolution and will bring the change. I was expecting it to happen maybe 10 to 15 years from that time. So my essay will just try to answer that question, why the youth of Bahrain went into the street, and till this day they didn't return back to their home. They are insisting that the change, they will bring it.
And if you could sum that up, of what is it that we here are most missing about why people are still fighting for that change?
Well, I will highlight 2 points. I see them in the eyes of the youth in Bahrain. The amount of hope. They have this huge amount of hope that we will bring the change. No matter all Western countries turn their back to us, no matter that Saudi Arabia occupied Bahrain and they are now controlling all the decision inside Bahrain, they are sure that they will bring the change. They have this hope. And the other point I see it in the youth eyes is the amount of dignity. We didn't used to have this amount of dignity. They don't accept anyone to insult them anymore. Neither policemen, neither any manager. It's over. They have these two things. The hope, we will bring the change we want it, and the dignity.
Those are very powerful powerful things to feel, aren't they?
And that's what makes me sure that the change is coming sooner.
What is it, you were saying before that your friend, Dr. Al-Deri, he took a slightly different approach in this essay. What is it that he brought to us about Bahrain? What was his perspective?
Ali Deri is not that much attached with political issues. He always attached with cultural articles and essay and these things. So when he wrote about the revolution, he wrote it from his own experience as one outside the opposition circle and political circle, and what makes him get into that circle and to be one of the opposition and one of the activists in opposition. So he was explaining in details what was happening before 14 February, which is the date for the Bahrain Revolution, and what makes him going to demonstration and to Lulu roundabout. He was explaining it with his inside emotion. The good thing is Ali Deri was keeping his note, so he wasn't just leave his emotion for next few months he will write about it. No, once he get the emotion, he just open his laptop and write it vividly. So I think this is the difference that Ali Deri did.
I mean, that was what made it so interesting to read, that it almost happened by accident, you know, that one day he was at Pearl Square and then he couldn't stop. Then it was like, my God, I just have to keep writing this. But the wider one of the wider themes, if I can ask the two editors, but feel free to add whenever, this issue, I mean, these are all writers that are emerging and have strong voices in the context of coming out of censorship and the sort of self-censorship that inevitably follows. Was that part of the experience of putting together this compilation, that you had to tackle that evolution of writers who are now free to express themselves?
Yeah, maybe I can just tell that story of Khawla Dunya, the Syrian author,
Sure.
who we discovered on a website which is called Safhat Suriya. It's called Syrian Pages, and she was really a very good writer, very early in the revolution. And yeah, so we thought that she might be a suitable contributor. So through friends, I found out her phone number, and then I called her, and I really didn't know how to talk to her because telephones are monitored. And you cannot use certain words like whatever, activism, civil society, revolution. I mean, everything that I actually wanted to talk about with her, I couldn't say. So I was kind of having this very awkward situation with her on the phone where I tried to explain what I wanted from her for the book. And I tried to find words to describe it. At one point, she just interrupted me and said, "What do you want? Do you want me to write an article for your book on revolutions?" I don't have any problem in saying this on the phone because I'm part of this revolution, and this revolution is about dignity, and I will say and write what I want. I will not silence myself anymore. And I said, okay, I don't want to put you into danger. She said, don't worry about putting me into danger. That's my responsibility. I want to express myself. And I thought that was very powerful somehow to hear that. I mean, I think she's really in a situation where a contribution to such a book could actually still endanger her because the revolution obviously in Syria is not over. I mean, it's outright war. While in Tunisia and Egypt, it's a bit different. But there are some contributors to this book where the situation is not resolved at all, and yet they decided to take part in it. And I think that's a sign of what these revolutions actually mean to them. And if we now talk about how disappointing the Arab Spring is, or ask the question, was it really worth it, etc., I think we really disregard the risks that these people take, and and we also disregard the meaning and the relevance of what actually happened, that this barrier of fear was actually torn down. And not completely, because the fear is still there, but that people defy it. Because as you said, I think that's really important, because there's hope. I mean, you don't want to, maybe people are ready to risk something, but you don't really want to risk everything if there's no hope. And people really have this hope somehow. And I think that the book is these life stories are actually an expression of that.
If I can just add, yeah, this kind of barrier of fear has definitely been broken on a general scale across the Arab world, I think, and there's no going back to how it was before. But like Jamal Jabran, for example, our Yemeni writer, he's long been writing in opposition to the Ali Abdullah Saleh government in Yemen. He's lost jobs as a result. He's even been attacked by state security forces, and this was years before the uprising. So again, just going back to what I said earlier, we just want to make sure that that narrative of, that this began a long time ago was present in this book, because there were people who were challenging that fear, that state control that existed in these places. Jamal and others were in this book were part of that.
I mean, for you two, Mohammed and Ali, obviously at very different points on the road to uprisings and freedom and justice, but that is something that we've seen a lot. People starting to, diss the Arab uprisings and say it was, a complete waste, and it's actually got worse. What is that like for you to be in the midst of, this kind of the criticisms that have started to emerge about this process that has brought so much hope and dignity?
I think people, taking it very quickly. It felt like, they having this kind of a romantic picture, or the pinky picture of the world's going to be nice after this dictator is going to be gone. And they forgot that, after almost, 30 and 40 years of dictatorship, it's not going to take, 1 year or 2 years to be done. It's a very, very long process. And if it's a book, the dictatorship is going to be only, the introduction for the whole book, because this is it needs 2 generations, 3 generations, and even more. It's going to take even 50 years, 60 years. We're not going to see, having a democratic countries. But what happened in 2011 was the best thing happening to the Middle East for a long, long, long time. Is at least people now, they can go on the street and they can say that they are against the government. Even Tunisia, Libya, in Egypt, in Bahrain, in Syria, everywhere they can now go and say it. 5 years ago, nobody could do that. And this is itself is achievement. I'm not being very optimistic. There are going to be a lot of... Sorry, there's children here. I'm not going to say anything. There's a lot of not good things going to be happening, but yeah. But at the same time, I'm sure, after a while, it's going to be not fine, but better than today.
I mean, that's what comes up again and again, actually, when on the streets, is how much people value that freedom of expression and are using it in different ways, and also how much people are prepared for the long haul, much more patience than perhaps are given credit for. But for you, Ali, what's I mean, very different situation in the sense that perhaps you have a sense that people have forgotten Bahrain. Is there an impression of that, and how do you deal with that?
Well, ask the Saudi money. That's why they forget. That's why the media is not covering. Just last week, I got an invitation that I have to attend in one of the big program in UK, and it's been cancelled. I don't want to mention that program, but it's one of the major programs in the UK, and it's been cancelled. And if you want to know the reason, ask the Saudi Arabia money. And nobody will mention that Saudi Arabia is controlling the media around the world. Not in the Arabic, it's around the world. They have the money. I will just highlight this. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Saudi, once they were asking him, do you think that the Arab Spring will reach Saudi Arabia? He said, yes, for sure it will reach, but no one will talk about it. He's certainly sure. And that's why they invest so much money for the media not to cover Bahrain, because they know Bahrain is the turning point for the Gulf. If any change in Bahrain, it will affect all the Gulf. And they know that they are like the dominoes. Once one fell down, the others will just... It will show the world how much the rulers are weak in the Gulf.
I mean, that's...
Actually, someone did talk about the Saudi uprising, though, and there is Safa al-Ahmad, who's Saudi. She did talk about what was happening. I'm not to disagree with what Ali was saying, but yeah, there are some possibilities where Saudis do get to speak out about what's happening in their country, and we're lucky, I think, to have one of them in this book who talks about that.
I mean, I think it's great that you had that chapter. It's a really beautiful chapter, actually, because it starts off with her basically saying, whenever she's in the Middle East, she says sorry to everybody. Sorry Egypt, sorry Tunisia
for being Saudi, right?
Yeah, sorry Bahrain, but under her breath. It's just really.
I can identify with that being American. It's something I've been doing for a long time.
Right. But that's actually, I mean, I will open this conversation up to the audience in a minute. But before I do that, I just wanted to touch on this issue of intervention, because presumably there is now quite a changed relationship in terms of countries that have been assisted by Western intervention or not, countries that clearly have
occupied.
not. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and the different dynamics and whether things are changing?
Well, it's just showing the double standard that the West have it, because in the day that Saudi occupied Bahrain, I remember the Hillary Clinton said in the news that they are in the wrong track. But just 1 week later, and you can ask the Saudi again, she changed her code, and they said that we are understanding why Saudi are invading Bahrain and occupying Bahrain. And now, since 2 years, we are not anymore independent country. We are occupied. Just 2 months ago, they assigned the Crown Prince as the deputy for the Prime Minister. By the way, we have the longest Prime Minister in Bahrain. He's 43 years old, older than me. So they want to do something.
43 years serving as Prime
43
Minister.
serving in the, I mean. So they want to do some change in the ministers. And when they want to do that, they, both of them, the Crown Prince and the Prime Minister, went to Saudi Arabia to discuss the change they want to do it inside the cabinet in Bahrain. So this is, the West are supporting these rulers. By all means, it's very, very old mentality rulers. We have so much corruption, so much sectarian, all of this because of their way of ruling the country. And the West is just keep quiet. But in other places, they are willing to intervene and use army and support army. But if it comes to Bahrain, even Molotov, they will say it's a terror. This is the double standard they have. It's just they are telling us either you accept these rulers with all of this disadvantage they have it, or we will not back up you or support you.
I mean, it is a very clear double standard. Mohammed, how do you feel about?
Yes, it's as Ali said. You know, someone before asked me, you know, told me, "Are you agreed with intervention in Libya?" And I said, "Yes, I did." And he said, "Why?" I said, "Because it's the only solution at that time." He said, "What about the Arab intervention, Arab troops? All Arabs are brothers." I said, "What kind of intervention? Do you mean like the Saudi Arabia intervention in Bahrain, for example? What do you mean? What country is going to, you know, help the people against Gaddafi?" And in the end, I'm not saying that, you know, the West came, you know, like emotionally with the Libyan people. No, there's a petrol, there's money, there's a dirty game that, you know, politics is always, you know, doing it, you know, for the whole history, and we always read about it. But at the same time, if this is the only solution, we can also use it in a very clever way, you know. Just, you know, we want to get rid of Gaddafi, or not. I didn't say that in the beginning, but people, you know, say it, that they don't care even if the West is going to come. Because if there's a problem now in Libya, militias and the army and everything, it would be, I'm sure it would be worse if that didn't happen when Gaddafi was going with all his tanks to Benghazi to destroy it. And when he went to Maserati as well, and when he went to West Libya, it will be the same thing. You know, something happened, demonstrations happened, and people saw the blood, and they couldn't stop. And if in that time, you know, anyone come and say, well, "I'm going to help you," they would say yes, even if they don't like to. But that's the situation, and we've been facing a very bad reality, but we had to deal with it at that time, and we're still dealing with it now.
The consequences of that with the militia. All right, well, let's open up to the audience here. There are mics, I believe, so please wait for them to come to you. And also, if one of the organizers can signal when we're running out of time, that would be great. So, yeah, questions? There's one here in the front. Please tell us who you are if you want.
My name is Ali Alizadeh, and I'm a Green Movement activist, actually, though nothing is left of it. We are quite interested in terms of in kind of watching Bahrain, because in a sense, Iran has a role, active role, in both Bahrain and Syria. In Syria for worse, and in Bahrain possibly for better. One simple question is actually watching Bahrain stuff. The population of the country, sometimes 70% of the population of the country is in a demonstration, and it's still you haven't achieved. to topple the regime. And I think, as you said, the support of Saudis and also the West is very important. The reason I'm mentioning this because one of the more clever ways of co-option of Arab Revolution, because Arab Revolution erupted and nothing could stop it, but the West tried to co-opt it. One of the ways was by intervention in Libya, by normalization of going back to the old style, and the second one was, I think, stopping, as you said, the domino effect, going to much more important economic countries, which were the Gulf countries, from Bahrain onward, because Bahrain would go Kuwait, then come the rest. And of course, we had Saudi Arabia, the Shiite sections of Saudi Arabia, and the 10% of middle class back in like February and March 2011. And they stopped it immediately, co-opting it by injecting huge amount of cash, about $200 billion, and providing 75,000 new jobs for middle classes. Yeah, that's why. How do you see Bahrain in relation to the other countries? You mentioned Saudi Arabia, but also Iran, and also just give us more kind of substance. Why you haven't achieved to go any further?
Well, as you said, we have almost 70% from the population went into the road and asking for the change. But also, you have to know the difference between Bahrain and the other Arabic countries. We have mercenaries, bringing them from outside. We have 15,000 troops from Saudi. We have also the army is from Syria, Jordan, Yemen. So in the security, they don't. The rulers doesn't trust their own people, so they are bringing mercenaries. And when the uprising was between middle February and middle March, was too huge for the government, and and the occupation from Saudi Arabia happened. The whole government was stopped. No one went to the work. No one did anything. So, how you will bringing down the regime if the security support? I will just give you a figure that in Bahrain, if you calculate the security forces and army and all of them, you will reach 100,000 in a country with 1 million. And you see. And also, I want to mention another point. You mentioned Iran and its double standard between Syria and Bahrain. And I do remember in foreign policy, I read an article about why the West is not backing up the opposition or the pro-democratic in Bahrain. Well, the Pentagon have the 5th base in Bahrain, and they don't look, they can't see what people of Bahrain wants or what's their demands or what's their basic right that they are not having. All what they see is Iran. Any change we will bring it to Bahrain, it might affect our influence in the Bahrain, so it might affect even the 5th base in Bahrain. So the Pentagon is only seeing Iran. He doesn't want any change in Bahrain because of Iran. And so Bahrain is, an open yard. Saudi is coming, Iran is coming, I don't know, America is coming. All of them are just fighting. And that's what I meant when I said that we are not an independent country anymore. They are all fighting, it's just Lebanon. They are all fighting in our ground. And all of what we are asking is our basic human right. We need to elect our government, we need a powerful parliament, we need freedom of expression, freedom of press. All of this, we don't have it.
Anyone else? There's a gentleman here. I'd like to see some women asking questions, by the way. But you go ahead, gentlemen.
I'm Sharif Aizer, Egyptian human rights activist. My question is about what is the part about Egypt revolution in the book? Who is there one, and who wrote it, and what is this about? Like which perspective?
Did something happen in Egypt recently?
Matthew, we did it together, man. Because the first time I met Matthew was during the revolution in Egypt. So I would be interested to know how much the book tackled the issue.
Do you want to talk about Yasmin?
No, you know her.
Yasmin al-Rashidi, who I'm sure many people are familiar with because she actually She actually writes in English a lot in London Review of Books and numerous other publications. She's written about Egypt and her kind of experience there from the years just leading up to 2011. You know, the attacks on the Coptic community that she's covered extensively, and kind of the frustration that was brewing in the country in those few years leading up to the to January 2011. So yeah, Yasmin has covered it. You need not worry. Do you want to say anything about her?
No,
piece?
that's actually the New York Review of Books that she writes, and mainly, yeah.
Who's got another question? Aha, there we go. There's a mic right next to you.
Yes, Karen Dubrovska, London correspondent for the Tripoli Post. I would like you to comment on the development of the media in Libya since the revolution. It seems now that every man and his dog has a newspaper, but is this actually a positive development? And also, could you comment on the political isolation law and the need for reconciliation between people who were part of Gaddafi's regime, and now there's a move to get rid of them all, which is similar to de-Baathification in Iraq, which was a major disaster?
Great questions.
Yeah, it's a real disaster, yes. As a friend of mine, Ghazi Giblawi here, sit down here, he told me once that the whole situation in Libya happening now is very surreal. To be honest, I need to sit down with many Libyans and talk with them about this law, the isolation law, that I really couldn't understand it at all in the beginning, and I didn't know what's the real argue about it. But what happened is now it's politics what's going on now, and unfortunately I can't give any comment about it, I'm afraid. It's really a hard subject, a very difficult subject. I would be very confused about it. I'm very, very sorry.
And what about the explosion of media in Libya? Is that something?
Well,
or the explosion of media across the Arab world, in fact.
Yeah, I mean,
Tunisia as well.
As you know, Libya. I mean, media always focus on tragedy in every, in any country, have some problems and everything. They don't focus about anything except that. And what's going on, now that people couldn't see much tragedy in Libya. So on TV or on media, you cannot find, because I really don't know, because all I'm checking at the moment, from Twitter and Facebook, from Libyan activists who I'm afraid they don't, write a lot in English. And yeah, about any current affairs, I'm afraid it's very, very difficult for me to answer.
Okay, anyone else have some questions for us? The gentleman here in the front, please. Thank you.
Yeah, Mohammed, I just want to make it more difficult for you.
No.
Okay, we have problems now, and we all realize that it's not easy to build Libya, but I'm quite keen to understand, what do you want to see in Libya?
What I want to see?
What do you want to see in Libya? I mean, after all these writings that reflected all the desire for change, and now you see all these problems.
My own opinion.
Your own opinion.
My own opinion. I don't look forward for democracy, because it's going to be very fake if we order democracy now in terms of politics or parliament or government, because we still don't have the freedom. And people still don't know what the freedom means, and all what they want now to see a president or a prime minister every 4 years. But what I see really need to change is the society itself, because they cannot accept each other, and people cannot accept any other idea. They don't know the basics of freedom. And as you know, from Twitter, from Facebook, from everywhere, you're Libyan, you read all that. Yeah, and it's all, so it's all, controlled by, it's the dictatorship of mass, so, and of people, and everyone has his own opinion and he thinks it's right. And as I said earlier, that we need 40, 50 years, sometimes we're not going to see the democracy, but the real democracy. I'm not seeing a new president every 4 years, but I'm seeking to see that I can go on the street and say that I'm an atheist and people will accept me. No, he's not going to accept me the Mufti.
I mean, that's something that you two as editors would have come across quite a lot, the sort of the evolution of people as writers who are starting to look after the revolution and talk about what they want and what they see in the future. What kind of things did you come across while you were editing?
I think most of the articles, I mean the authors that we commissioned were kind of, I think, close to each other in terms of political convictions, and you know, and I mean, Yasmin Rashidi from Egypt is obviously somebody who was in Tahrir Square. Khawla Dunya from Syria is somebody who is part of the kind of civic opposition in Syria, etc. Most of them share sort of their values, and so there's, I mean, maybe unfortunately, I don't know, there's no Muslim brother, for example, amongst the authors. So I think that the authors basically can share a vision of democracy, which is made up of freedom of expression, of respect for the basic rights, for women's rights as well. We have a lot of female contributors, and women's issue was also a very important issue in the book. People that would look towards party pluralism and you know, kind of healthy environment for political competition. And I think that also the issue of social justice is very important to many. That some of them say, well, the problem is that much of politics is now reduced, for example, in Tunisia, to identity politics. You know, the question whether the Sharia should dominate the state or not. But we went to the streets because we were also demonstrating against corruption and against poverty and unemployment, and all of these issues are basically getting lost when, like in Egypt, you fight over a constitution and you enforce a certain vision of a state on a majority of the population who, you know, are looking towards better, you know, betterment of their livelihoods, etc. So I think these are the issues that the authors also would like to see realized, and many of them actually end with a kind of, not with a gloomy scenario, but with some, you know, worries towards the future, where, for example, the Tunisian author that Matthew has also cited says, oh, I'm really afraid that in the end, everything that we fought for is going to disappear, you know, in the corridors of power and in, you know, in the conferences where people appear in their suits and you know, talk about something that they were never part of, actually. So there is definitely fear that they are going to be marginalized in the future. And I think in Egypt that's definitely happening, that the youth of the Tahrir Square is being marginalized now. So obviously there are different visions for democracy, but I think the people that we assembled here have a kind of open vision, of participation and social justice. Yeah.
I don't think anyone's confused about the road to whatever they want to achieve. Yeah. You know, it's going to be long and it's going to be hard, and I don't think, you know, these contributions really over-romanticize anything that went on, and as Layla said, they end kind of with an ominous kind of feeling at the end of a lot of these pieces. And you know, I think if you talk to people now in the Arab world, you get mixed reactions regardless of political background. You know, some people are very optimistic, some people are hopeful, some people are pessimistic. But you know, there was a process that happened, an uprising, and I haven't gotten any sense of really regret from people who took part in it, of what they did. I mean, it was a natural reaction. It was a response to decades of this kind of oppressive dictatorship in their respective countries. But I think everyone realizes that whatever happens next, they're going to have to continue being active and continue fighting for whatever kind of change they want to see happen.
Yeah. Okay, I see there's a lady over here in the front. There's a question.
Hi, I just wondered how much of a role you thought social media played in writing the revolution.
And the process of making the book?
Yeah.
Or in the... Well, we actually wanted to provide something different than blogging, right? I mean, maybe you can also say something about it. I mean, obviously the social media were very important in the revolutions. And Ghazi Reblawi, who is here actually, who is a Libyan blogger, he was part of the first bloggers meeting that took... Yeah, he's tweeting.
Never stops.
He was part of the first bloggers meeting that we organized in Beirut long before the revolutions, and they actually gathered Arab bloggers together, and I think that these meetings really set the stage also for these bloggers actually to be able to first link up to the conventional media like Al Jazeera, etc., and that these networks were in place when the revolution started, and were networked with each other actually, and they could provide support and solidarity to each other, whether it was Morocco or Iraq. But and there also, I mean, I think one or two contributors also blog, but we really wanted to have life stories, kind of personal stories that that the authors really, when we asked them, were asked to actually reflect on, and not to have bits and pieces from blogs here and there that everybody can access anyway. We really wanted to have articles commissioned for this book, and kind of with very specific questions, how you as an activist, as a writer, kind of engaged in change, etc., and how did you feel, and how was your life affected, etc. So
social media, I think, is more like hard news, where it's just reporting on events, and it's very fleeting without really the reflection, and we were kind of going for more of the, for authors to sit down and really reflect on what happened with this book.
Yeah. And presumably you,
and these guys can say, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, the social media, I had it as a tool during the war, but during, writing the essay, I used my memory. So that was, that's the only connection with the book, I mean, the book, it was only this essay, and but at the same time, social media, let me meet some people like Layla and Matthew later on and everything. So.
And Ali, your blog is?
Actually, I didn't write an essay in the book, but the social media, for me, during my hiding period, it was helping me to understand what's going on the ground. I mean, I'm on the internet now since '96, and I can understand what's true, what's rumors, and if the headline is too big, I can measure what's accurate in the headline. So the social media helped me during my hiding period. And I'll just tell you this. During my hiding, the beginning, I mean, during the martial law, which is signed by the king, and the whole terrible things happened during that period, the one who was hosting me came to me and told me that the revolution was ended. There is nobody in the street. And when at that time I didn't have the internet, but I used to have the satellite channels, and I was seeing the news. And I returned to him back. I said, no, I can see the anger in the eyes of the youth in the street when there are some demonstration. I told him that no, the revolution didn't die, and it's still alive. And after the martial law, we discovered that the people are more insisting for the change than before. So this is the social media helped me to understand the situation in the ground perfectly.
Okay, who else has some questions for us?
One over here.
Okay, there's over here.
I was kind of curious about, when in South and Central America and the Caribbean there were leaders like Fidel, and there were...
I'm sorry, I can't speak you.
Oh, sorry.
That's better.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfectly.
Okay. I was just wondering, are there any leaders of the opposition in the Arab world that unite all the countries in the vein of Che Guevara, in the vein of Fidel Castro during the revolution in Cuba? Is there a strong leader or personality that can unite this? Because it seems to me that part of the problem as an outsider is that the Arab world is always divided among itself. And by being divided among itself, it lessens the I don't know what it lessens exactly, but it lessens the power to some degree, because there's no real unity. The unity in itself is scattered. So I'm just curious to know, are there any leaders within the opposition?
I can maybe start. For it. I think in the beginning, people are really unified, or at least rallied around the slogan that people want the downfall of the regime. I think it was really more of a kind of, But the strength of the revolutions initially was actually that they didn't have a very pronounced leadership. You know, it was really this outpouring of citizens who went to the street, and it was trade unionists or school teachers or students or workers or whatever, academics, and you know, a bit different composition in every country, but whatever. It was diverse and there was no clear leadership. I think that is a weakness now. It's definitely a weakness in Syria, where the opposition obviously is very united, very divided, but it's also a weakness in other countries. And I think also different to the beginning, where people still were kind of united by this common idea of, you know, we want to reclaim our citizenship, etc. We want to bring our regimes down. Now, what happens in Syria has nothing to do anymore with what happens in Yemen. And what happens in Yemen has nothing to do anymore with what happens in Libya. It's really, I mean, it's now really very domestic situations, and sometimes it's very geopolitical ones, like in Syria. But the developments, the respective developments, are now very kind of separate from each other. So no, I don't think there's a figure like Che Guevara or, you know, kind of, and everybody identifies with them. And actually, I realize that now that I live in South Africa, how important it is to have not only leadership, but a very moral leadership and a very integral leadership. And obviously, there are figures of leadership like Ali is in Bahrain, or some of his friends, and, you know, kind of civil society leaders. But yeah, to have these kind of moral authority figures that are really also internationally known and that can gather support, I don't think you have them now in the Arab world.
I think it's better, you know, to stay as it is, so people, you know, can get used to it and becomes individuals, instead of having one leader, you know, who gonna become a dictator one day, like Gaddafi and like Jamal Abdel Nasser and all the Arab leaders before. Yeah, that's my own opinion.
I just make comments. Yes, the opposition and the pro-democratic don't have any leaders, but at least in our GCC, all the rulers have one leader that against any change and reform and democratic. So it's just the opposite. The King Abdullah in Saudi Arabia is paying so much money for the change and democratic not to happen in GCC. So it's just the opposite.
I think in each country, yeah, there are definitely different kinds of leaders who have, you know, played an important role in the uprising and before, and a lot of them have been imprisoned, are imprisoned, have been killed because they've been so active. One example, I think, is Nabeel Rajab in Bahrain, who I've known for a couple of years now, and I've never seen someone so revered. You know, walking down the street with him and just seeing the way the people, the respect that people have for him when they see him, you know. That's not something I'm used to seeing in many other people, and he's very modest and very humble. But he's in prison. And even if he wasn't in prison, unfortunately, I think these days sectarianism would get in the way of their kind of being, because he's a Shia Bahraini, it would get in the way of him kind of being any kind of unifying figure in the greater Arab world. It's quite interesting, actually. I think only a few years ago, after Israel's war in Lebanon in 2006, Hassan Nasrallah, Bashar al-Assad, even Mahmoud Ahmadinejad in Iran were, I think, the most popular leaders in the Arab world. But I think that's all since changed, obviously, because of what's been happening in the past couple of years.
Yeah, yeah.
And there was Gamal Abdel Nasser. Of course, we can't forget the great unifying Arab leader who was, I think, that kind of person you were referring to.
But maybe, can I just add, I think that the issue of unity is something sometimes also exaggerated. I mean, just referring back to your question about the media pluralism. And I think that's often really a problem, like in Iraq, for example, when the media exploded, like in Libya, when media just become mouthpieces of different political interests. It's not an expression, you know, when it's not an expression of democratic pluralism, but when media just used as mouthpieces for militias or political parties, etc. On the other hand, to over-exaggerate the need for unity, you know, it's not going to happen. And this is also what democratic expression is about. You know, why should the opposition of a country be united? In Germany, it's not united. On other countries, you know, there are different ideological stances, worldviews, etc. That's fine. I think it really becomes a problem when you can't find any strategy to bring about change, obviously. But to, you know, to overemphasize this, oh, Arabs are never united, they're just tribes and they will always kill each other. I think that's also very, they can become very Orientalist. Sometimes.
I mean, certainly when I was reporting, people would come up with this thing of, where's the Palestinian Gandhi, you know, and I'd always say, in Israeli prison, probably. Right. I mean, there is a problem with looking for leaders in countries that have had decades of repression and have clearly repressed all their leaders, imprisoned, tortured, and killed them. Anyway, I think we have time for one more question, maybe two. Who wants to ask something? Is there a, no? Nobody? All right, well, we'll ask our own questions if you're sure. Okay. One of the things that we were talking about earlier was, and this is relevant to a book that's looking at writing coming out of the Middle East, is how much of the opposition and the protest movement has moved into art and culture, and that there has been a sort of a renaissance in art and culture. Is that something that you all have seen in different ways?
Yes. I'm working at the moment with the Lebanese director about the art activism in Libya. I'm doing as a producer and a screenwriter for a documentary, and she's directing, and she went to Libya to meet 4 Libyan activists who launched a coffee shop, a cultural coffee shop in the middle of Maserati. And they doing this kind of activism through arts and books and gigs every Thursday night, and kind of like the political discussions in the cafe, and it's called Morganti. And this kind of, I see the art activism is one of the specific things can do change later on, because what I believe is art and culture is the only thing can change people. And I see there's a very, very great scene now in Egypt, in Tunisia, in Libya, in Syria, and Bahrain about art activism, which is, as I said, is one of the very small specific things can do change.
Was that something that you two came across?
Yeah, I mean, Syria is really very, very, I think, poignant case of very creative means of resistance, and unfortunately it's not covered very much, I think, in the Western media, maybe because, yeah, I think maybe because it's very much, I mean, about political jokes and sarcasm and playing with, you know, the cult of leadership and so on. It uses a lot of, you know, local images, etc. So maybe it's not that accessible, and also it's taking place in the Arabic language. But I think the Syrian revolution is extremely creative when it comes to cartoons and jokes and songs and dances and even local folklore and slogans, etc. And yeah, I think it also shows kind of the civil part of the revolution, and also this kind of outburst of expression that was repressed for such a long time. And I think Syria is really an extreme case of the repression of freedom of expression, simply because the media was completely dominated by the state, and it was really a country where you could only whisper, basically. I mean, and when you're sitting in the public somewhere in a coffee shop or whatever, you wanted to talk politics, other than Egypt and other than, I don't know, Morocco and maybe even Tunisia, and in Syria it was really extremely difficult to voice any kind of dissent or that kind of sort of resistance, and I think it's really, yeah, an expression of how that, you know, that kind of defies this image of the Syrian revolution as being dominated by Islamists and by Al-Qaeda backed militias and you know, militarized opposition. There is really a great, yeah, part of it which is made up of artists, of activists, of, you know, people of different confessions, also representative of the minorities, etc.
That's the importance of knowing the language and the culture, right? I mean, when you go to these places, like, if you fly into Egypt for your first day, for first period, you spend there, you're not going to understand the nuance of the culture and how hilarious Egyptians are, like, especially in the protests that happen in Tahrir. It's been talked about a lot, so I'm not going to talk about it too much now. But I think people who come there and who are the ones who are responsible for bringing a lot of that reporting who go there who are responsible for bringing that reporting back to the outside, they miss a lot of that nuance because the language barriers, the cultural barriers, and that's why I think, again, it's so important to really give the platform to people who are from there and know it best. Of course, they're part of it. They create it, to let them, kind of really tell people about it.
Well, I wasn't in the ground to see that, but
But you have been on the ground for years.
yeah, but what I saw it is something different, that the people in Bahrain was shifting and using the new technology on the art. They made some videos, and I know it's something normal in other Arab countries, but usually Bahraini people doesn't do these things. So during the revolution, they start to make some funny videos and funny musics, like we have this slogan, down, down, Hamad. Now they don't say it. They just make like this. And by the way, you could go to jail for this from 6 months to 3 years, yeah.
For knocking.
For knocking in this tone, which is down, down, Hamad. You could go from 6 months to 3 years. And it's a crime in Bahrain. And they are now planning to do it up to 5 years. Because it's insulting.
An even bigger crime.
Yeah, it's insulting His Majesty.
It's insulting the craftsmanship of the table that's knuckle in a
Okay, I'll do it as
hostile
well.
way.
I'll do it. I'm demanding as well now.
Did you see that video from Bahrain? I don't know if while you were hiding. Someone sent it to me where they, after the Pearl Roundabout was destroyed, the Pearl Monument and curfew was enforced, protesters set up a little fake Pearl Roundabout or Pearl Monument in one of the villages that was under curfew. And they filmed it from a window. They just left it there. And one police car comes, and like the policemen get out of the car, and they're looking. They don't know what to do with this thing until like 5 or 6 police cars come, and finally they disassemble it. I mean, it's just another form of creative resistance that I think.
By the way, this video, I do remember it, and it's happened in many villages. But this video, it talks from them around 3 hours and a half to decide what to do with it. Because they make some calls with the Operation Santa.
Chain of command.
Yeah.
I didn't watch
just
the whole
to
thing,
remove just the symbol of Lulu Roundabout.
Yeah, I can see that would have.
And by the way, they removed the 500 first, which have the Lulu Roundabout in it. They cancel it because the Lulu start to be the theme of the symbol of the revolution.
I think there was another question here.
Do we have time for one last question? There's a gentleman here. Oh, you've got the mic.
Yeah.
Great.
He brought his own.
I just wanted to know whether your relationship with Libya has changed since Gaddafi's left, because you never really knew. Like myself, I'm from Baghdad, and I only have known Iraq with Saddam. Like in the classrooms, he was on every wall, and every room had it. So now I don't really know when I say, I love my country, I love my people. It's changed, When you say you love Libya, what is it that you love? Because it's the Libya that you've always known which it was defined by, is now a different place.
It's not about I love Libya. It's about I found myself were born in Libya and they lived 15 years of my life, that's the time when I grow up, and it's all stuck in here. So it's not about love. It's always, I'm sure you have it as well. It's between hate and love and everything. You love your memories, but you don't want to go there and see, the different reality, because it's all about the imagination and what you have in. So my relationship with Libya now, it's fine. I've got friends in there. I've got family. I'm not really, as yesterday when I was in Hay, they asked me this question and they said, if I really have the time and money, to travel, I prefer to go to a country that I've never been before in my life, so to discover something else. I'm already, lived 15 years of my life in Libya, and I think this is enough for me at the moment.
Do you find being outside, you idealize your memories and you kind of make it something that maybe it wasn't?
I don't know. At the moment, because I'm in the process of writing my novel, and being away makes me, discover all the time, remember some details happened to me when I was younger, because this novel is about my childhood more. And sometimes I start to remember things happened to me when I was 3 years old. It's like happened yesterday. And I think if I went now at the moment to Libya and saw different things, I'm going to lose all the images that's stuck in here, and I need to write them down. So maybe I'm going to have a different idea once I finish the novel. But for the time being, you know, I have this kind of relation with Libya as the place that I lived in for a long time, and also, you know, I'm seeing that there are some other places I didn't go to, and I'd like to go. I'd like to go to Japan. It's going to be nice. I mean, we're going to have a good time in Japan rather than Libya.
All right, can I say something about Muhammad's paper? Can I say something?
Yeah, of course, yes.
Because I think, I mean, I think your paper really stands out, your contribution in the book, because you were 20 when you wrote it, right? And it's very humorous. I think it's the only contribution which is really like, I mean, it's written in a very funny way, you know. You can really see the kind of spirit of the youngster and kind of playing the tricks on the teacher, and also with these political, you know, jokes with political connotations and so on. But it's also, and I mean, you talk about a lot about your 3 friends that you played out these jokes with, etc. And then also it becomes very sad in the end, because you lost these friends in demonstrations, all 3 of them. So it's not, I don't think it's an idealized memory. I mean, I think it shows, yeah, it's maybe a bit idealized because everybody idealizes about their childhood, but it's also a very harsh reality that comes to the fore in this contribution, and which I think it's very powerful, actually.
All right, well, on that, I think, oh, we have got time. So there's a gentleman here with a question.
Does seem to be time, so I'll go off the deep end here. I'm James Thacker. I've published a 700-page book with Arab Revolution in it, going back to Qadr, actually. And I've worked with 6 human rights movements. And we gave a prize at Index quite a long time ago, going back to the unity question, or the universalist question. And the head of Al Jazeera got the prize. And he spoke about how the information offices before Al Jazeera had basically been controlled by the sheikhs, and that now there was this unified thing, completely unprecedented in the Arab world, that there was a unified voice, Al Jazeera. But I'd like to ask you, since you're media people more than political people, is there a political class? I mean, if you're going to have a revolution, you have to have people who love the law, who want to create constitutions, who care about ministries. When I spoke to Tahrir Square people, I said, do you like going into politics? They said, oh, it's a very dirty place, we're not going to do that. Well, if you think it's a dirty place, you're not going to have a political system. I mean, and though it's certainly true that you lock up people, and this is a terrible environment to be having a political class, is there a political class? I mean, quite apart from charismatic leaders, you have to have large groups of people who are prepared to sit down and work out the problems. It's very boring, it's very time-consuming, it's dangerous, but one doesn't hear that this is happening, and I think in the world really would like to see that happening.
I think you already answered your own question. I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, you need people who know how to work in bureaucracies, you need technocrats, you need people how to implement policies. Absolutely. I think this is why also laws like this, I mean, it's a politicized issue. I can't really answer that for Libya, whether it's good to exclude people from the former regime or not, depending on whether they actually knew how to do governance, you know. I mean, some of them they didn't. But if they do, I think it's, yeah, it might be dangerous to exclude them. Not only because you make enemies, but also you exclude everybody who actually worked, you know, worked in different ministries and portfolios, etc. But I think the main problem is what you actually said, that a lot of those young people who were participating in the revolutions actually see politics as a dirty business. And they don't even want to be part of it. And they can't, you know, they're not interested in conventional politics, they're not interested in political parties. And this is why they try to, you know, organize outside of the sphere of what we see, you know, conventionally as politics, the official politics. But I think actually they're not faring too badly in that sense. I mean, in Syria they organize a lot on the ground. They actually, you know, substitute state services that really try to provide the population with medication, etc., etc. And I think in Egypt also there's a lot of mobilizing and organizing going on that is maybe ignored by the mainstream media, but it's happening. And I think they're not faring worse than the conventional parties that are now in power.
But the Nasrallah and the Hamas and the more radical groups, the Brotherhood, are they better organized as a political class?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the Islamist parties are definitely better organized than this leftist or secular ones, because they have grassroots. Mobilization. You know, they go and build hospitals and schools and kindergartens, and this is what people care for in the end. You know, I mean, you have to give them. You can give people ideas and values, but if you can't give them anything that matters for their daily lives, then it's not going to be, you know, it's not going to change anything. But if you provide all of that, of course, people are going to vote for you.
You get an impression as well that people see it in a much more long-term way. I mean, what I hear a lot is people just saying, well, the Brotherhood and the old politics is kind of out of touch with the mood of emerging populations post-uprising, and so they're growing awareness and movements through different forms that might take the next generation into political activism, by which time these old guard, old-style politicians will have just exhausted themselves and bored everyone else. So I think that's a much more longer game, or certainly that's the impression I've had.
Yeah.
Most of them need the rehabilitation, I think. Ex-prison, I mean, most of it, like Morsi and others were in prisons for a long time. Libya as well, most of the heads of
the Muslim Brotherhood, I think they are out of touch, and they had exercised a lot on Libyans in the last 18 years. And I think now we came to a political deadlock when, unfortunately, we lack vision, but at the same time, people, even qualified people, pulled back because they didn't want to be associated with the political Islam, for example. But some, they have different agenda, like national agenda, than any ideological agenda. So as a result, we don't have the right resources, and we don't have vision that unite people after the fall of Gaddafi. I think this is the next challenge, that to include everyone, despite all our differences. I think that needs to be discussed frankly. Thank you.
I think I think that eventually the revolutions are also about, you know, you have to deliver to the people in the end. And there's already disenchantment with the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, and they're losing popularity, and there will be disenchantment with the Libyan political elite if they don't deliver to the people, if politics stays that localized as it is in Libya, you know, if it's all about, you know, who's gaining from the revolution, who's losing. And I think in the other places as well. In the end, people want to have something delivered to them, and we'll see.
If I can just bring it back to why we're all here. I think people all over the world will agree politics is a dirty game. And to understanding politics in any country, I think we have to understand what's happening on the street and what's gone into the recent history in these different countries. And these authors all in this book give that, you know, even if they're not politicians, or maybe they're not going to be politicians, you know, they help explain a lot that we don't understand, a lot of people don't understand, I think, about what's happening in these countries, and that's why it's important to read this. It's not going to be the political book. If you want to, you know, maybe your book will address that more, but this is going to give a more different take on it. Yeah.
I might just add to what she was saying, that those Muslim Brotherhood and I call them the old power. They are strong in the ground, yes, but I think one of the reasons why they are strong in the ground is because they speak the language that the people understand it. And I think there is a lack. We cannot deliver our message exactly to the people, and I think it's like that, actually, especially in Bahrain. If I want to talk about Bahrain, I think the old power know how to speak the language that the people want. And we cannot deliver our ideas or our language to them. We cannot translate what we want to them.
All right, well, it's been really fascinating to listen to all of you. Thank you for sharing your experiences and your worlds. Thank you all for coming and contributing.
Thank you.
Thank you.